Welcome to this great experiment in online worship that we're engaged in here at Wildflower Church. Thank you for joining us, because one of our preachers' nightmares is that they come prepared to give worship and no one shows up. And here we are in the sanctuary, which is pretty empty, but fortunately, Paul Patterson, the lay worship leader, showed up, and Elkie Battis, our music director, showed up, and we've got Laurie Willis, who's helping us singing, and we've got one stray congregant. There's always one in Unitarian Universalism that's going to show up and not follow orders, and Lynn Whittington did that today. So we're not all alone here, and we'd really like to thank Justin, Elkie's partner, who's really been helpful in setting up the technology. We spent a lot of time here yesterday trying to get set up, and so I hope you can hear us okay. I know some of you may be familiar with Zoom, some of you may not. With Zoom, you can go into the chat box and use that to convey any message to us if you're having any difficulty. I just want to give a wave out to everyone who can see me. If you can see me, wave back. I can see some of you. Oh, yeah. Oh, some really big hands right in the camera. That's great. So this is an experiment. We're not trying to recreate our normal worship services, but we feel in this time where people are, feeling more isolated. We're asked to have social distance between others. Now, I don't like that term, actual social distance. We need physical distance between some, especially those of us who have got health concerns. But that doesn't mean we need to limit emotional, social, spiritual distance. And so we hope by having online worship here, we can help close some of that, because I know some of us may already have felt isolated in our lives and may feel more isolated. This is an experiment. We're hoping to do this. We are certainly planning this through the end of March. We just don't know what's happening as we move forward with time. I sent out an email yesterday. It's got a link to the order of service. But for those of you who want to join us in singing, we want to ask you to mute yourselves, because there's a delay here, and we'd rather have a symphony than a cacophony of sound. So if you can actually mute yourselves, that would be helpful. But Laurie Willis and Elkie will be leading us in a few hymns. We'll have some joys and concerns. Paul and I will give some reflections on the situation we're in now. So this is what we're trying to do. If you're having struggle hearing us or anything, I'm sorry, we couldn't get subtitles for my accent set up for this. There was a big demand for it, but we weren't quite able, that budget didn't quite stretch to that yet. But this is all an experiment. We hope you feel connected. And I have to say, it's kind of moving for me to look out and see all these people, because my great fear was I'd be preaching to myself and just have a big picture of myself there. But it's great to see all the people there, and thank you all for joining us today. So I'd like to invite Paul to light the chalice.
Please join me in reciting the chalice lighting words shown on your screen. With the kindling of this flame, we affirm our commitment to accept life's gifts with grace and gratitude, and use them to bless the world in the spirit of love.
Okay, we're going to sing the first hymn. Laurie Willis is going to lead us. It's Guide My Feet. You should be able to see the words in the screen. Guide My Feet's quite a familiar one, so you can maybe just follow along. There might be enough of a delay you can actually sing just along with Laurie. But please mute yourself, and we'll start the hymn.
To run this race in vain.
Please join me in the unison reading, We Need One Another by George Odell. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone. We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs. We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again. We need one another when we are struggling and would value support. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
We do need one another at this time, and yet we're getting all this advice that we need to have this social distance. We are in unknown territory. We're unknown territory for most of us living today. We've not been through a pandemic such as this. And it's a time of anxiety, it's a time of uncertainty, and it's a time of fear, and we're all struggling with that. And that's why we felt at Wildflower it was very important that we still try to keep this connection of worship with one another. I know I'm already feeling moved by seeing all your faces out there, and that's really quite powerful to see, because it can feel a very isolating time. And many of me already through health-wise have felt somewhat isolated, and and there's many forces in a society that seem to push us to greater and greater separation. And then one of the things we love about religious community is we come every Sunday or maybe 4 or 5 times a week, and we see friends that we love and care about and connect with. And then are we going to lose that? And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is how do we find connection as we struggle with the separation that's happening to so many of us. It's a difficult time, and it's not business as usual. It's not business as usual for our government, for our health services, for our church. And so we all need to do our part. What can we do we have a problem. How can we, reduce the problem? And we are taking this action now, but we want to keep these worship services going, and our plan is to do it through March, and we just don't know what's happening past March. We're going to take advice from government as we hear it. But we took this step. The board unanimously took the recommendation I made on Thursday to go to online worship, and I was pleased that people here agreed that we were willing to connect here. We thought having it in the sanctuary would give some familiarity. You see a banner there. I'm in my usual costume, and seeing the faces and connecting. We thought that to try and get some connection, some normalcy in a very obtuse way, and technology can allow us to do that. And please bear with us. We're going to need your patience. We're going to need your flexibility and your adaptability. And I think all of those will stand us in good stead as we move forward. But we really are into an unknown space. And I want to thank everyone who came here to help us, set up for this today, because it was a lot of work. We were here quite late last night and for a long time, and a lot of people have stepped up to help. And I know a lot of people will help in the future. So we're planning this through March. I can see it going into April. We don't know what's happening there. As I say, we're in a time of unknown and a time of uncertainty. So we just ask you, reach out to your neighbours, reach out to your family members, reach out to your friends, because we really need to do it. Use technology, use video streaming, teach people how to use it. And we'll be working as a church. We have a board meeting, an online board meeting this afternoon, where we're going to try and explore what can we do as a church, and then, because I think there's a lot of needs, and we also always have to think about the most vulnerable amongst us, who may not have the resources that some others have, and that we as a church have. Maybe we can share some of these resources to help some of the most vulnerable who maybe don't have the option of not going to work. So we'll be exploring these today and in the time ahead. I'd like to invite Dee Adams, our president, for a message.
Good morning. It is wonderful to be here, and we thought we'd create this bit of normalcy by doing our brief community matters this morning. And so, as we usually do, we say and sign our mission. So please join me in doing that at this point in the service. So, growing spiritually. spreading, oh, no,
Together.
I mean, I think being on camera is really freaking me out. So let's try that again. I've done this even in person. Growing spiritually together, spreading love, justice, and joy. Thank you. And I just want to celebrate, Brian did a little bit, but Justin Arnett has been here to really help us. This is Elke's partner, help us with getting this technology moving. And Brian has just put in so much time to make sure we had a presence together this morning. And thanks to Elke for practicing and getting us musically inclined. So have a wonderful day, and we just want to celebrate your being with us.
Well, it wouldn't be a Wildflower worship service without a story for all ages. And I've taken this social distancing thing quite seriously. This is a spoon that I made up. And I have told this story before, but I was thinking, what story Time for All Ages could I do about social distancing? And I thought, large spoons. And this is a story that comes from the Jewish tradition. And it's about this person who's really wondering about what does hell look like and what does heaven look like? And so they ask God, what does heaven look like? And so he goes to heaven and he sees all these people and he notices that there's this huge bowl of boiling hot soup in the middle. And the people have only these really large spoons there. But they all seem happy, they look quite healthy. And he goes, well, that's good. So he says, well, I want to see what hell looks like. And so he goes to hell, and it's the same situation. There's this huge pot of soup in the middle, and the people have these little large spoons, but they're really, really weak, and they're really hungry, and they look really grumpy, and they look really tired. They might be in Scotland, I'm not sure. And they're just there, they just look really miserable. And he went back and the person said to God, I don't understand. How come the people in hell are so unhappy and unhealthy? And how come the people in heaven are so happy and healthy? He says, go and watch them eat. And he goes back and he watches them eat. And he goes to hell and he sees them. They're all trying to feed themselves like this. And the spoon's too long and they're just pouring the food over themselves and burning themselves. Then he goes to heaven. And you see everyone has got the spoon and they're feeding each other like this with long spoons. And he says that's the difference between heaven and hell. Heaven is where we look out for each other, we help each other, because we can't do this ourselves. Now, for some of you, especially I'm sure all the children out there, like, well, why don't you just hold the spoon there? Well, that would be a good solution, but it's a Jewish parable, so you need to kind of suspend a certain amount of disbelief. But I think the important thing is, in this time where we're going to have to adapt and be flexible, we're going to have to look at the stories we tell ourselves in a different ways. Like, I can only socialize with someone in person. Well, maybe you can't. Maybe you do need to, teach them to videotape. I mean, maybe that's some of the best things we can do for our friends who don't have access to technology, or I was just uncertain about using technology. Maybe we really need to find a way of getting technology into people's hands and also helping people understand and use technology, because I think it is different to see people's faces face to face in video than a phone call. I remember my daughter when she was younger, she struggled to speak to my parents on the phone for a long time, but we did a video conferencing at that time on Skype. Those of you remember Skype? Mm-hmm. That allowed us to connect. So maybe we just need to look at what we normally do and just reframe it and just kind of reorient our thinking, like how can we connect with one another and what can we do for one another when we can't be physically present for one another. So thank you so much. It's so unusual to do the Time for All Ages where I'm not surrounded with all these children, but I'm glad to see a lot of your faces there. So thank you for being there. It's nice to see your faces waving. And it really makes a difference and makes this worthwhile. I kept thinking last night of the Eleanor Rigby, the Paul McCartney song about Father Mackenzie writing a sermon that no one will hear. And that was one of the big fears, that no one was going to come online today. And so it's lovely to see you all. We're going to have a time of joys and concerns right now. And I think this is really important because we wanted to find some way, and that's one of the reasons we're trying to do Zoom, is some way of having interactivity. And it's going to be a little different. I do have the regular bowl of water and the pebbles here, but we're going to invite people to, on your chat line, if you've got a concern. We're going to do the concerns first, and then we're going to do the joys. So we're going to invite people, you know, who have got concerns. If you go down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a chat box. Then just, you know, say that you would like to share a concern, and then if you can unmute yourself, you can share it. And I'm going to try and put on my Bluetooth headset so if I can actually hear you, because we can't hear through the speakers there. And Dee's also going to be on her headset so that she can actually hear them. But what we'd like you to do is put your concern, say you'd like to put, you'd like to sign up on chat for a concern, and then unmute and we'll call your name and you can unmute yourself and speak it. Or if you'd like to share the concern just in chat, we'll do that. And I will put a Bible in there, and then we'll be singing Spirit of Life at the end after we've done concerns and joys. And then I'll be offering a pastoral prayer. I'll put in one final stone for all those joys, and I'll put in this stone for the joy of all of you who made the effort to attend online. I know there was a bit of work on your part, and again, a joy of celebrating this community who were able to pull this together at fairly short notice. I mean, we started working in this basically Thursday night, though I'd been preparing for some of this before then, but most of this happened within the last couple of days, and it makes it all worthwhile to see your faces and hear your thoughts. Well, I'm going to invite Laurie to come forward. We're going to sing Spirit of Life. The words will be displayed in the order of on the order of service. It's in the order of service, but it's going to be on the screen. But Laurie, you can sit here so they can see you as well.
Turn on your Bluetooth.
Come to me, come to me.
I invite you now to join me in a spirit of prayer, and meditation and reflection. Spirit of life and love, Spirit of this community gathered here, gathered together not physically but through technology, connected emotionally, socially, and spiritually. We come together seeking connection. Spirit of love, help us find the strength, patience, and flexibility to adapt in these difficult and unusual times. We welcome all of you who have gathered here, and through your presence, we do make this across the miles, across the different homes, a sacred time and a sacred place of connectedness. And we turn our minds and hearts towards one another. We recognize that we all have heightened emotions at this time: fear, anxiety, uncertainty, disappointment, frustration, and perhaps even anger, though we're not quite sure what at. And even with these heightened emotions, this gathering seeks to bring into a circle of concern all who need our love and support. Those who are ill, those with compromised immune systems, those who are in pain, whether body or spirit, those who are lonely and feel further isolated during this time of physical distancing, and those who are dealing with loss. Our thoughts are with all those currently suffering with COVID-19 coronavirus, and those throughout the world who have already lost friends and loved ones. Let us pause for a moment in silence in a time of support for all the victims of this disease. And even in those difficult times, there is much gratitude to be shared. And we send our deepest gratitude and appreciation for all those working on the front lines to offer care to others. We think of health workers, social workers, first responders, and all who work in caring for others. And we also recognize those whose jobs are important to keep our society functional: the supermarket workers, food distributors, the utility workers, and our government officials. And at this time, which is a crisis for many of us, our thoughts go to those throughout the world who are already living lives of hardship and whose circumstances only worsened through the pandemic of the coronavirus. We think of those of us whose economic circumstance is fragile and who may be economically imperiled through loss of income at this time. We are concerned for the many refugees throughout the world whose already desperate circumstances only worsened as countries throughout the world further isolate themselves. May the refugees not be forgotten at this time, and we pray they find strength and the support they need to rebuild their lives. And we think of those throughout the world who live with violence as part of their everyday life, and we pray they may find peace soon. We are part of a web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. And we are grateful for the miracle of consciousness, which we all share, the consciousness that gives us the power to remember, to forgive, to change, to cry, to love, to learn, to hope, to care, to laugh, to celebrate, to feel, and to heal. May we all find healing, connection, and hope as we engage the challenges and the struggles of life. In spirit of life and love, help us to adapt to our life at this time. May we engage life with strength, courage, compassion, patience, and flexibility today and always. I invite you to join me in another moment of silence. Blessed be, and amen.
Last year was a tough one for Laurie and me. My mother died unexpectedly in April, and my father, who suffers from Alzheimer's and doesn't remember that his wife of 60 years died, moved into a memory care facility. So when we learned this last summer of an opportunity to go to a yoga retreat on a Caribbean island, we signed up. We don't usually take such exotic vacations, but the timing and circumstances seemed right. Some R&R combined with the spiritual enrichment we both enjoy from yoga sounded like a good combination for self-care. We just got back from the retreat 10 days ago. Given the evolving situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, we were fortunate to make that trip. A few days after our return, I received a letter from the senior living facility that takes care of my dad, explaining their procedures and policies to manage the coronavirus. One new policy is that anyone who has traveled internationally is not allowed to visit the facility until after a 14-day self-quarantine period. A second letter, received just yesterday, asks that we consider not visiting at all and instead use phone, email, or video calls. My dad and his fellow residents in memory care are very vulnerable to the virus. Exposure could be deadly. At the same time, people in memory care need as many human connections as possible to stimulate their brain and brighten their day. Technically, I can visit my dad starting March 20th, after the 14-day quarantine period is over. But should I? I want to tell him about my trip, share pictures, stories, and little things I brought back for him to touch and examine. I want to brighten his day. This connection is so important to him and to me. I'm so conflicted on what to do. We started the yoga retreat with an opening circle, where each of the 16 people attending shared their motivations and goals for coming. While most were from Austin, the majority of us didn't really know each other at all. But through shared lodging, 2 yoga sessions a day, communal meals, and recreational outings together during our free time, we got to know each other pretty quickly. There were multiple people who recently lost a loved one. Multiple people who had recently gone through a tough divorce. Some were taking a self-care break from a busy family life. Some were regulars on the yoga retreat circuit. A week later, at the closing circle, we shared our favorite moments. There were lots of smiles and laughter, and a few tears as well. None of us came to the retreat thinking we would get counseling and therapy. But in a profound way, we had enriched each other's lives by making connections, by being part of a community that lasted for only 7 days. We are fortunate to have here at Wildflower a community that is here 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I don't come here to be taught by scripture or to be consoled by divine intervention. I come to Wildflower to be exposed to different ideas, points of view, and practices in spirituality. I benefit from choosing the combination of spiritual practices that suit my needs today, comfortable knowing that that the combination I choose may be different tomorrow, next week, or next year. I get strength and motivation from being in a community of diverse people that are doing the same thing as I am, but along their own path and at their own pace. This coming week, I will reflect on how I can maintain my connection with my dad during the coronavirus pandemic. The spiritual nourishment I get from Wildflower will help me navigate this unexpected separation.
Well, it wouldn't be a worship service without an offering. And we're going to have an offering now. And I know some people had contacted me during the week about how could they continue supporting the church in this time, because we still have bills to pay. And I was very pleased that the board unanimously voted on Thursday that we're going to pay our religious education staff and all our staff as if they were working their regular hours. And we're going to do that for the foreseeable future, because we know, I mean, we heard during the Joyce concerns that some people are in a fragile state. And, you know, when people are not able to work through no fault of their own, then it's important to support them. We also want to keep the church going, because I think in some ways in times like this, it becomes even more obvious the need for religious communities like this. Some places are completely shutting down, and I respect that, and some churches are. But we feel it's really important to go that extra effort. But how can we use technology to connect? It's not the same as being here in worship, But I hope each of you are experiencing some form of connection, some form of comfort, some form of care, and some form of love through the fact that we are here with you today and will be for the foreseeable future. I will talk a little later about some of the ideas I have moving forward for what we can do as a church. But right now up on the screen, we have the different ways you can have the offering, and we'll leave it up during the music while Elke will play some music for meditation. You can text to 833-277-7250. The first time you do that, you will be asked for your name and for payment information. And the next time you can just text the amount. And I've used that quite a lot, and it's really good. You can also donate through the website, and that's at wildflowerchurch.org giving, and you can donate. Some of you may already be pledging online. And we can still mail a check to Wildflower Church at P.O. Box 40395, Austin, Texas. And I feel like I'm doing a PBS pledge drive right now. In fact, and the zip code 78704. And yeah, so I feel very much like I'm auditioning for public television here. So, but please continue support. But if you're struggling economically, take care of yourself first. I say that during stewardship time. It's important that we all take care of ourselves first. And if you can support the church, then please continue to do so. And so thank you very much for all your support. And well, ask Elke to play some music. And reflect on where you are right now and what you're grateful for, what your joys and celebrations are. I'd like to do a reading now. Some of you may have come across this. This is by Reverend Lynn Unger, who is a Unitarian Universalist minister. And she got a lot of publicity for this reading during the week. She was even made the national press. So I'm going to read this to you now. It's called Pandemic by Reverend Lynn Unger, who's a Unitarian Universalist minister. What have you thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel, cease from buying and selling. Give up just for now on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You can hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has become clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. That is the words of Lynn Unger, the poem Pandemic. Well, it's been quite an emotional roller coaster this week. I know I've been going through emotions of anxiety, worry, and desperation, and anger, and disappointment. And that was before I got out of bed this morning. And so we're all kind of struggling with this unusual circumstance. And I was joking with one of my ministerial colleagues this time, like, I don't remember covering this in seminary, what to do. And Meg Barnhouse, the minister of First Church, replied and she said, it's called Church in the Time of Plague. And I think I missed that class. But so we are really in a time that we kind of read about it in history books, but we really think we're dealing with a lot of emotions, and there's a lot of uncertainty right now. We just don't know. And we want to visit with people, but we don't want to be the cause of their illness. And we all know people, and there's many people within a Wildflower community who are, have got health concerns. And so often when we've been in difficult times before, one of the things that I know has consoled me, and I'm sure it's consoled many of you, you've always been able to connect with someone, you've been able to visit someone, you've been able to meal with people, and you come to worship service or you have a small group meeting at church and you leave feeling better. I mean, I've even heard board members say that they leave the board meeting happier than they arrived. And, so I think we don't have that physical connection. So it's like, well, how do we cope with this where one of our main instruments of caring for ourselves spiritually and emotionally is not available to us? And as many of you know, I'm a former engineer, so I'm very comfortable with technology, but but technology it's a two-sided sword. There's a lot of problems with it, but I think in this case, technology may be our friend. And I've always been a fan of the telephone, and I realized this back in the 1980s when I first came over to the States. I was 6,000 miles away from most of my close friends and all my family. But I could pick up a phone. At that time, it wasn't a cell phone. It was still one that was attached to the wall. But I think I got really excited by cordless phones at that time, that I could walk around the apartment with it. But I could actually call and within 20 seconds be speaking to my mother or my father, or speaking to my brother who was living in Egypt at the time. And within 20 seconds, I could be talking to people all through the world. And that's a beautiful connection, because technology can allow us to transcend time and space in really powerful ways. And I think that's a dilemma we're facing with this idea. And I don't like the term social distancing. I think it's physical distancing. And we really need to find ways to overcome that physical distance, to connect socially, to connect emotionally, to connect spiritually. And that's really what I think we're wrestling with at this time. The other thing I've been thinking about is how, as a church, do we want to respond? One thing was we need to keep doing worship services, and I would really want to think about maybe we do one of these midweek as well. We maybe have a larger service on a Sunday like we're doing now, and also maybe have a smaller one, maybe a more interactive, an even more interactive one, not purely interactive one during the week. Because I think we need these ways of connecting right now. And this was the first time, and if you've got any feedback of how we can do better or any ideas of how we can connect, please email them to me and email them to Dee. I also want to put a plug out that our caring team is really interested in anyone who wants to be part of a phone tree where we do call up. We've got the keep in touch teams that I know Jan's implemented who are going, the facilitators is going to reach out to it. But we're thinking, that's a lot of work on one person, but if any of you would like to be part of a phone tree, please email caring@wildflowerchurch.org, caring, C-A-R-I-N-G, at wildflowerchurch.org, and there'll be information about the announcements. But we want to try and put a phone tree to really connect with those people who are maybe housebound, who are isolating themselves. And if any of you know anyone, or if you yourself are worried about your health or have been diagnosed, please let us know. If you're diagnosed, that's all the more reason for you to connect with us in some ways. And we can use technology to keep that social, emotional, and spiritual connection together. Because it is a new time. The other thing I wonder about, and I know it's come up in the Joys and Concerns, is I hear schools closing down for 2 to 3 weeks and parents are going to be home with their children, and maybe they plan for spring break, but maybe they need to go back to work sometime, or maybe they need to work next week and the childcare's fallen through. Is there anything we can do as a church community to take care of children whose parents need to work? I know there's concerns about physical contact, but I think we need to kind of open up ourselves to some of these opportunities. What can we do as a place with space and people that can maybe help, families whose parents, they can't afford not to go to work and they're going to work, but they've got children to take care of. I think we need to brainstorm about how we can reach out to those. And I think we always, as we do with our justice work, and there's a justice issue here, how are we going to look out for those most vulnerable in our society, those who don't have the technology resources that we have, to connect, or the technical know-how that we have? How can we share our knowledge, our technical equipment perhaps, I don't know about sharing space right now, but how can we share our knowledge and technology with those who need it? I think we really need to be creative at this time, like the story with the spoons. We need to really be think differently and trying to reframe how can we serve others while not being physically there. And we need to keep justice issues at the forefront of our mind now, because those people, those who are most vulnerable and are most ripe for exploitation are more likely to get exploited at this time. So we need to get an eye out, as well, and above all, as caring for ourselves and our families. There's a beautiful reading I came across, if I can find it. It's by Rabbi Yosef Kanevsky. And he says, every hand we don't shake, we must become a phone call that we place. Every embrace that we avoid must become a verbal expression of warmth and concern. Every inch and every foot that we physically place between ourselves and another must become a thought as how we might be of help to that other, should the need arise. So let's think about the changes you're experiencing in your life right now, and how can we transcend those through creative use of technologies, this creative imagination of how we can change our perspective on how we can close that social distance as we increase physical distance. I think that's what we're called of as human beings, and I think we're especially called for that as Unitarian Universalists. And again, I invite, if you've got any ideas, let's not shut down the communication as we change the physical aspect of church. Let's increase the communication. Like, how can we brainstorm around ideas to, as I say we wish to do, transform ourselves through the search for meaning and transform the world through acts of love? How can we embrace love as we move forward at this time, but it's not so easy to do in a physical way? How can we do it through technology? How can we do it at a distance, a physical distance? And remember, that's what we're called to do, spread love, justice, and joy. If we can spread love, justice, and joy in a meaningful ways, that may be the best thing we can do to halt the spread of the coronavirus. So thank you. I invite you now, we're going to sing our final hymn, Love Will Guide Us. It's 131 for those of you who have a hymnal, but we'll have the words up on the screen, and I'll invite Laurie.
Through the hard night.
I want to thank you all again for being part of this glorious experiment. I will close with the words which are on your display. Let us bless and look after one another. Let kindness rule in our hearts and compassion in our lives. Let us spread our love, kindness, and compassion to all we can connect with in the time ahead. Go in love, go with love. Blessed be, and amen. And thank you for being part of this glorious experiment. Take care.